अगले कुछ वर्षों में भारत दुनिया की तीसरी सबसे बड़ी अर्थव्यवस्था और 2047 तक भारत विकसित देश बन जाएगा।
A $30 trillion developed economy by 2047. That is the Narendra Modi government's clear ambition for when India reaches its 100th year of independence. And as this very eventful year, 2024, full of geopolitical turmoils and economic upheavals draws to a close, it's a good time to look at how well India is poised to achieve that target. Well, the economy received a recent jolt with GDP growth numbers falling to a 7-quarter low of 5.4% in July-September. Inflation continues to be worrisome, and around the globe, uncertainties continue to mount. But a recent joint report released by the Economic Times and CRISIL says that the road ahead is considerably stable. According to the India Progress Report 2024, India's economy is set to touch the $7 trillion mark by 2031. Sure, the country's GDP growth is projected to moderate to 6.8% in fiscal 2025 from a strong 8.2% last year, but it will still be the world's fastest growing major economy. Meanwhile, inflation is expected to cool to 4.5% this fiscal from 5.4% in fiscal 2024, giving some relief to households and businesses. Now, here's the big picture. Private sector capex has been muted for a very long time. Government spending has slowed too. But here's the brighter picture. The government's infrastructure investments have actually doubled in the last few years, from 1.7% of GDP pre-pandemic to 3.4% this fiscal, said the report. The private sector is yet to unleash its animal spirits, of course, but the report estimates capacity utilization to hit a 22-quarter high of 75.8% in fiscal 2025 and projected private capex climbing to 2.45 lakh crore rupees in FY25 from 1.59 lakh crore rupees last fiscal year. The manufacturing sector is estimated to raise its GDP share to 20% by 2031 from 17% now, driven by electronics, renewable energy and EVs. India's mobile phone exports, meanwhile, have already surged to 15.5 billion rupees, making the country a net exporter in just 7 years. Meanwhile, the road sector has seen national highways grow by 60% in the last decade, and renewable energy is booming too, with 60 to 65% of India's installed power capacity expected to come from non-fossil fuels by 2030. All this while, like I said, India navigates challenges like global trade uncertainties, rising geopolitical risks, and the push for sustainable development, aiming for net zero carbon emissions by 2070. In this special episode, which is part of ET India Ascends, we speak to an economist and business leaders from two sectors, electronics and renewable energy, to make sense of the road ahead for India in its ambition to become a $30 trillion developed economy by 2047. It's Tuesday, the 24th of December. I'm your host, Anirban Chaudhary. This is The Morning Brief. My first guest for today is Dharmakirti Joshi, Chief Economist at CRISIL. I started by asking him if he's worried about the recent fall in India's GDP growth rate, and if not, why not?
Well, the first part, the slowdown is transitory in our assessment, because what happened was government was not able to spend for capex as it has budgeted. So I think that pulled the growth down more than was expecting. And that's why I think some of the forecasts have been marked down for the year as a whole. But we still expect around 6.8% GDP growth this year. And over the medium run, we expect 6.7% GDP growth. What it means is that economy will hit 7 trillion by the end of this decade, and the per capita incomes will rise from $2,600 to about $4,500 by 2030-31. Now, there are three drivers of growth from a long-term perspective. One is capital, the other is labor, and the third is productivity. We expect capital to contribute maximum to growth because right now capex is being driven by government and by households and the housing sector. Gradually, private corporate sector will also come in. And the driver of productivity will be number one, better infrastructure, which reduces turnaround times, improves connectivity. And we are seeing benefits of that as our logistics index has improved. But the second benefit, the driver will be the digitalization that is proceeding at a very fast pace. We've seen credit enablement frameworks allowing fast dispensation of credit. Also, the payment systems have become efficient. Fast tagging has allowed the traffic to move much faster. So digitalization combined with physical infrastructure will offer productivity gains for the economy. Now, reforms also help in a big way, but reforms have been somewhat slower. We are reaping the benefits of GST reforms right now, and I think that further tweaking of GST will help in raising the efficiency or creating a common market going ahead. So I think in a nutshell, the growth path is reasonably good for the medium term, which is around 6.7% per annum. Now we need to improve the contribution of labor to this growth.
Right, sir. The first point you mentioned was capex. Now, let's talk about private capex, and it's seen a lull for a very long time now, both in terms of new capex as well as project completion. A slowdown in government expenditure also at both central and state levels have limited, growth in capital investments. In fact, to 5.4% in the second quarter of FY25, down from 7.5% in the previous quarter. And this is according to data released by the National Statistics Office. Now, what makes you optimistic that things, especially in the private capex cycles, will improve?
I think you're right. I think that the investment uptick has been driven by public investments right now. I'm not too worried about the government capex slowing down in the June to September quarter. That was because of several factors. I think elections had happened, and I think the number of factors slowed down the government spending in the second quarter, which is going to rise, which already showing some signs of increasing. Now, coming to the more critical question, when will the private corporate sector pick up the baton of investment from the government, and why we are optimistic? See, number one is when we look at the order book of capital goods for companies, they are quite healthy right now. That is an indication that some kind of capex pickup is going to happen. Now, we also have industrial policy in terms of the PLI scheme, and the full benefits of PLI will be realized in due course in our assessment. We have seen mobile and solar panels where I think backward integration is being planned, and that will also help elongate the capex cycle. See, what is also going to happen is that in the PLI part, we are going to move to more value addition, which is capital intensive. So right now, I think the PLI in electronics, etc., hasn't led to that much capex. But what is coming forward is going to lead to more capex. Also, I think the story of steel and cement, which is essentially linked to the infra capex creation by the government, I think that is going to continue. So we are reasonably bullish on steel and cement investment outlook. And then there are new age investments, I think, in semiconductors, in energy transition, which is electrical vehicles, etc. They are increasing their contribution to GDP over the medium run. So there was a recent study by RBI which also looked at the phasing profile of pipeline projects. I think that also suggested that the capex is going to improve. So not immediately, but I think for the medium run, yes, I think private sector is going to pick up the baton from the government, but it's going to be a very slow process. And the main reason why it's going to be a slow process is because there is too much uncertainty right now. And in periods of uncertainty, the corporate sector generally tends to be cautious in nature.
Like I said, electronics will play a huge part in India's growth story. Understand how? I spoke to Josh Fowler, CEO of Zetwork, a B2B manufacturing platform that specializes in sectors like infrastructure, heavy engineering, consumer goods, and renewables. Here he is talking about the potential of India's electronics industry.
I think it's a great industry, and this is an old industry outside India. But in India, it is quite nascent. The government policies of Make in India, the PLI schemes over the last 10 years have really, truly enabled India getting into the manufacturing spot in this space. And looking at the the Honorable Prime Minister's vision of 2047, the Amritkal journey, I see electronics as being a very key contributor. We have an interim milestone in the next, I will say, 5-6 years of reaching $500 billion of manufacturing. Now, the beauty of electronics is that it is tech intensive as it is skill intensive, as it is people intensive. For India and Indians, it is a full spectrum employer. I call this space ESDM, Electronic System Design and Manufacturing. The software bit normally recruits a very narrow band of people, but the hardware bit, the manufacturing bit, the design bit really is a full spectrum employer. You'll need designers, you'll need process engineers, you'll need associates, you'll need supply chain professionals, the full stack. And so this is really, when you look at the journey of India getting into over the next 25 years, this will be a great employment story, apart from being a great global supply chain hub for electronics.
Let's talk about Zetwork now and its various business segments, consumer goods primarily, and also industrial manufacturing and strategic electronics. How is Zetwork playing a part, and what are its plans looking into the near future?
Zetwork is probably the most unique startup unicorn in India at this point in time. Electronics as a division in Zetwork is really catering to two segments. The India story. This is something we have now worked towards, and we have built a wonderful supply chain of factories pan-India. We are today present in the north and in the south, and we have plans to go to the westward of India. The second space we will enter is the India Plus story, where we look at how do we export to countries like the US, Europe, and other important markets, which will be strategic for India, leading on to India's Y2K movement in hardware. We are today in consumer electronics, consumer durables. We have entered the automotive space. We are in the telecom space. We are in the industrial space, in the aerospace and defense area, and we've been very successful.
Josh, what are Zetwork's expansion plans in the mobile phone segment?
I think phones is probably the most vibrant and the largest category in the world. This is an area we will continue to invest and expand. So the current number is 2 million plus, depending on the model we do. We are very keenly looking at the next revision of the PLI for mobile phones. What I do see is a big thrust of two things. One is non-Apple phone exports, which are today happening at a very minimum level. I think that's probably one of government's pushes. We are going to be very keen to be a part of that journey. The second and more important will be the value addition in this particular vertical of ESDM. I'm looking at the component part, which is going to add value into the production of mobile phones. That's where I think really the Atmanirbhar Bharat starts to get very interesting in the mobile phone space. So we think that the new PLI will have some emphasis on value addition. And so we are preparing in that direction for phones.
You spoke about non-Apple mobile manufacturers, and I found that very interesting. So are you looking to work with some? And I mean, especially the Chinese manufacturers, say like OnePlus, who are now coming back to India and have announced pretty significant plans. Are you planning to work with some of them?
I think in the phone category, Apple is global leaders. They're technology leaders, and their ecosystem is probably the most robust. And, we will continue to explore opportunities in that ecosystem. What we've seen today is we have started to export. The majority of the exports out of India are coming from the Apple ecosystem. And so that's something which the government of India is trying to rectify. So we are very keen to support customers and partner with the government as the mobile phone PLI gets recast to better enable our growth in this category.
Next, I wanted to ask you about semiconductors. Now, again, a really, really promising segment, although, the action there is a little limited compared to what we just discussed, which is the mobile phone segment. but a lot of promise, a lot of targets, etc. Very, very ambitious. Now, ZWork is not present in the semiconductors segment yet in India. What kind of potential do you see there, and do you have plans to get in?
I think it's a great question, and I think this is going to be the future direction which India will head. And I see us as a company also looking at this direction very seriously. See, I think when you look at the ESDM bill of materials today, semiconductor is an important component of this bill of material, but there are other non-semiconductor, non-logic chips also which are important. So what we as Network are going to do is we're going to be studying the opportunities here. We will look at what direction our customers are giving us. We're going to be looking at which direction the government is going to be guiding us. And then we're going to see the strategic fit, for what our in-house capabilities are.
Understood. The electronics segment, vis-a-vis the government's efforts at growing it has been really driven by PLIs. What more do you think the government can do to accelerate growth in this segment?
I think it's a great question. I think there are so many things which are happening around the world. So the last 10 years of government policies started by focusing on the Indian market. There was priority given for manufacturing in India under the Make in India program. The second phase, I'll say starting 5 years ago, was the PLIs. And this was enabling and incentivizing any shortcomings India may have. And I think it's been very successful. Going forward, we see that there are a couple of categories which are missing today. I think the notable one is IT hardware. The next element would be the components which should be enabled. So I see the government pushing in this direction as well. The third, possibly most important constituent is the states. When you look at supply chains, when you're looking at factories, the states' inputs are very important. Now, there have been a few progressive states, I'd say both in the north and the south, who have been, in a way, very much in sync with the government of India's plans. But I think there needs to be more emphasis on tying up these two incentives. The last and most important point I want to mention here is I think we need to look at partnerships with countries who are maybe today not as close in the ESDM space. And this is going to be very, very important. And I will name the US as probably the most strategic partner in this journey. India offers a great manufacturing alternative. US has probably the best technology in ESDM. If you look at the OEM categories in mobile, in compute, in even in telecom, in servers, in chipsets and operating systems, US leads. And so this is something which I've advocated a couple of months ago for India and the US to sign an MOU on the ESDM space, looking for avenues for cooperation. So this is something which I would maybe possibly recommend the Indian government to look for avenues to formalize this.
Now, climate dynamics, its increasing unpredictability, fast-moving sustainability targets, and the debate around who pays to battle climate change will be a massive factor that decides how the world, and of course India, moves. Here's Joshi from CRISIL again.
Most of the countries in Asia, they became richer by polluting the environment. So the climate was not an issue for them. Also, I think they faced an environment where tariffs were coming down. We are trying to grow our economy at a time when global tariff situation is becoming more complicated, more complex. So you have to negotiate these two very, very deftly. And I think we have our own energy transition plan, which is net zero by 2070. We'll also have to build adaptation infrastructure because climate is hurting us. And that's very important for maintaining, keeping the growth sustainable. I think deftly managing the tariff landscape that is emerging. And also, I think doing climate transition in a way, it doesn't come in the way of growth.
My next guest is Anmol Jaggi, co-founder of Gensol Group, a renewable energy solutions provider specializing in solar engineering, procurement and construction services. It also runs BlueSmart, an all-electric ride-hailing and car rental platform.
So, Anirban, first of all, I do believe that by 2047, India will be a developed nation and India will be a leader in green energy, clean energy, and electric mobility. We are putting in all our efforts in for there. As regards to the specific thing on what is Gensol playing a role on the renewable energy side, we are pioneers in two things. One, we have been doing for a close to a decade now, which is building world-class solar assets, which power thousands and thousands of homes or industries. And I think we have built a lot of power plants, but the pace of addition of new power plants is at a pace which we have never seen in the past. Just to put it in perspective, Gensol till now has built about 1 gigawatt of assets. In 12 years, we built a gigawatt, and now in the next 18 months, we will build a gigawatt. If I have to project out
Wow.
something like 2047, which is 23 years from now, I think we would have built hundreds of gigawatts by then.
1 gigawatt in the next 18 months. Do you have like a 5-year horizon capex, or where the capex will be allocated and what the expansion will be?
Yeah, of course. So we are working on our Gensol's 2030 plan, and by 2030, we would have done 10 gigawatts.
Speaking of solar trackers, that is one of your businesses, of course, and it is to me a brilliant intersection between tech and renewable energy, and it speaks to the future as well, at where renewable energy projects will head. Can you give me a broad sense of what's happening there? Not just what Gensol's doing, but what is happening in that space and in other forms where tech and renewable energy are intersecting, and how will that help?
So I think the concept of solar trackers come from the thought that let's do more with less. It's the same sun which is going to shine 8-10 hours a day. And how can we make most of it? Basically, as a solar tracker, we are able to track the solar just like a sunflower going from east to west. And because the solar panels are then facing at all the times the direction of the sun, the efficiency of these panels increase by about 16-17%. And there is cutting edge technology which goes behind it. There is a lot of astronomy, there is a lot of GPS, there is a lot of mechanical and electronics combination. So it's a combination of high technology coming in and various different forms of science which come together to actually operate a tracker. We acquired a solar tracking company in 2023, and I know Shailesh, who was the founder of this company, spent about 15 years in perfecting the design. So we are beneficiaries of that.
International expansion is happening very well for you. What is the path forward for that? Any other geographies that you're looking at, and what kind of projects?
Now, as of now, we are only focusing on the Mid East market, and that's the only place of our focus, and we will continue to double down over there. Maybe in the next 3-4 years, we go into some other market. So 20% of our revenue should come from international business. About 80% of our revenue will continue to come from India.
This is by when? This 80-20 split?
Yeah, so as of now, I think it will take us 3 years to get to that number.
And now it's what, 95-5 or 90-10, something like that?
Yes, no, it'll be more like 98-2 today.
Anmol, let's talk challenges. Is cost a challenge in the solar segment?
Yeah, so first of all, Anirvan, now solar projects are no longer prohibitively expensive. They were when we started off in 2012. Today, solar power energy is the cheapest form of energy as compared to any form of energy. So when we compare it to natural gas, or we compare it to coal or nuclear or hydro or wind, solar is the cheapest form of energy today. To put it in perspective, when we started in 2012, the per megawatt cost of solar was about 15 crores a megawatt, and today it is down to 3 crores a megawatt. This is extremely competitive, very efficient. But because we are also talking of the future, I would say that this will go down from 2.5 rupee to 1.5 rupee in less than a decade. You could pretty much say that the solar power in before 2047 could actually be at 1 rupee a kilowatt hour, and the world will be so blessed because we will be using only clean and green energy at a very affordable price.
Do you think there's enough headway being made in terms of problems like land acquisition, grid integration? Financing is still I think remains a problem.
So in order of problems that you mentioned between finance, land and connectivity, I think finance is the easiest to solve. and is getting solved. Land is a slightly tougher problem, but the biggest problem is about getting transmission connectivity. But a lot
Yes.
is being done on that. I think government has already come out with its vision for 2035, and the vision document for 2035 on transmission side was released about 3-4 months back, and it clearly says where all transmission connectivity will come for renewables. And it is not just a vision plan. I think we are seeing a lot of action actually happening on ground, with so many tenders being awarded on the transmission side. And I think that will be the key enabler for more and more renewable energy power to come in. But in terms of the problems, it is connectivity, transmission connectivity, the largest, land the second, and finance the third.
And what about skilled manpower?
I would say manpower is above finance. Getting adequate manpower is above finance. I think India could be short for today for about maybe 2 lakh skilled technicians for solar, because today, like in this year, maybe 30-40 gigawatt of solar power plants will be built in the country, and we need so much manpower on the ground to build it, but we do not have enough of it.
The other thing is, talking about Blue Smart, which has been quite a pioneer in, sustainable mobility services. Do you see more such models coming up?
More such models, I think we are already seeing a couple, and I'm very happy that we have inspired a lot of entrepreneurs to actually start similar models like Blue Smart. So we have a lookalike now in Bombay, we have a lookalike in Hyderabad, we have a lookalike in Calcutta. So there are a few lookalikes which have come up, and I think the world needs more of Blue Smart type models, complete all electric cab services. And I'm happy that we are inspiring a generation of entrepreneurs which will only drive clean, green, electric cars. And India will be a much better place if actually all our cars become electric.
Will you give me a sense of your fleet, Blue Smart fleet now, and what it will go to?
Anirban, our current fleet is close to about 9,000 vehicles. And we expect that in 5 years, we will touch the 1 lakh vehicle mark.
Anmol, do you think we are doing enough to build infrastructure around electric mobility? Aren't we too slow?
Yeah, if I have to say, we are the tortoise in the race. So tortoise in the race is slow, but will definitely win.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be faster.
I think we are not, as a nation, we are not doing enough.
Right. Let's talk about green hydrogen now. You recently backed a project also. How is that going? And what do we see sort of in the next 5 to 7 year horizon? What kind of expansion do we see?
So green hydrogen is where solar was in 2012. Very
Right.
initial, very high cost, very expensive. Technology is fast emerging. So we will see a lot of technology disruption happening over there. Personally, for me, as a journey on entrepreneurship, whatever mistakes I made in the early part of solar, I'm trying to not do them in hydrogen. And
Like?
I think I underinvested. We should have invested more on solar during the early days. I think I would really want to deploy at least a few thousand crore rupees in the hydrogen sector in the infancy itself, and then make it even larger. And I think we will double down, quadruple down on our investments in green hydrogen.
Could you sort of elaborate a little bit on some projects or some investment allocations?
So at our end, we are building the first hydrogen valley in Pune with to supply green hydrogen to chemical industries. We are building the first green steel plant of India in Raipur, which is going to produce 100% clean and green steel. We are also setting up a very advanced electrolyzer manufacturing facility in Gujarat. So these are some of the few projects that we are doing. We are looking forward to create a very large green ammonia hub in Andhra Pradesh. So very large and very intensive projects that we are trying to do on the green hydrogen space.
This is my last question to you. On a scale of 1 to 10, how well do you think India is poised to achieve its renewable energy target of 500 gigawatts by 2030? 1, of course, being very slow, 10 being at just the right pace.
So we have to do 500 gigawatts. We've already crossed 200, and we have 6 years left. And in this 6 years, we will have to do about 60 gigawatts, 550 gigawatts a year to hit the number. Will we do 50 gigawatts a year? I'm reasonably confident that we will be able to hit our 500 gigawatt mark. Only constraint on that will be perhaps can we get enough amount of connectivity or not. If the connectivity, I think that is also being planned very much in advance. Today, we know till 2028 where all connectivity is there, etc. So I think more or less I would say 8 on 10 that we will be able to achieve the aim.
That's it for today. You were listening to this special episode, part of ET India Ascends on the Morning Brief. It was produced by Vinay Joshi and sound designed by Rajas Naik. The Morning Brief drops every Tuesday, Thursday and Friday. Keep listening to it wherever you get your podcasts. The external clip used in this episode belongs to its owner. Credits are mentioned in the description.